FBI warning, turn off this hidden setting now. And before we get into exactly which setting we are talking about, it is genuinely important to start with the real, actual source behind this entire warning. Because this is not some vague, unverified claim circulating on social media. In early 2026, the FBI issued a formal public service announcement specifically warning both iPhone and Android users about a genuine, well-documented data security risk. And in this video, we are going to walk through exactly what the FBI actually said, the specific hidden setting buried inside your phone that this warning is really pointing toward, why this particular risk is not limited purely to a handful of specific apps you might already be suspicious of, and the complete, practical step-by-step checklist for actually locking this down on both iPhone and Android. So let us start with exactly what the FBI's actual warning said, because getting this right matters considerably more than repeating a vague, dramatic headline. The Bureau's core concern centers specifically on foreign-developed mobile applications, and particularly apps maintained by companies headquartered in China. And here is the specific mechanism behind this warning. Worth understanding clearly, China's own national security laws legally require domestic companies to share user data with the Chinese government upon request, meaning a popular app developed by a Chinese company could, under this specific legal framework, be required to hand over your contact lists, your precise location history, your private messages, and other personal information to a foreign government, regardless of whatever that specific company's own privacy policy claims about how it protects your data. And the FBI's advisory specifically states that this data can be stored either locally on your own device EE or on servers located inside China, for as long as the developer of that specific app chooses to retain it, meaning there is genuinely no reliable external guarantee regarding how long this information persists or exactly who ultimately gains access to it once it has been collected. And it is genuinely worth understanding exactly why this warning arrived when it did. Since it did not emerge from nowhere, it follows years of escalating documented concerns specifically surrounding TikTok, culminating in a 2024 federal law requiring its parent company ByteDance to either divest the app entirely or face an outright ban within the United States. And by early 2026, a new deal had actually been finalized, creating a new majority United States-owned joint venture involving Oracle, Silver Lake, and the Emirati investment firm MGX specifically. And it is genuinely important to understand that while this TikTok restructuring highlighted exactly the kind of concerns driving this entire warning, the FBI's actual advisory specifically extends considerably further than any single app, explicitly stating that data security risks are not specific to only mobile apps or those which are foreign developed, meaning this warning genuinely represents a broader call for improved digital hygiene across your entire device, rather than simply a list of specific apps to delete. And it is genuinely worth walking through exactly how serious the FBI's own technical assessment of this risk actually is, since the Bureau's advisory specifically warns that certain foreign developed apps may contain what it describes as malicious code and hard-to-remove malware specifically designed to exploit known vulnerabilities within your phone's operating system. And according to the FBI's own description, this kind of malware can install what security professionals call a backdoor, granting attackers escalated privileges directly on your device, meaning they can subsequently download and run additional malicious software, access your stored data, and, genuinely concerning, maintain that same level of access even after you believe you have already closed the app or specifically revoked its permissions yourself. And it is genuinely worth understanding why this particular threat has historically been considered a somewhat larger risk specifically on Android devices compared to iPhones. And this connects directly to exactly this specific hidden setting. This entire video is genuinely built around the honest technical answer comes down to the relative openness of Android's ecosystem, and specifically the common, long-standing practice of sideloading, meaning installing apps from sources entirely outside the official Google Play Store. And this is genuinely precisely the specific setting this FBI warning points toward. Most directly, since Google has specifically begun implementing new restrictions blocking installs from unverified developers by default, but the underlying risk genuinely remains real and significant for anyone who has ever downloaded an app directly from a third-party vetted Play Store specifically, meaning the very first, most important hidden setting genuinely worth checking right now involves exactly whether your device currently permits installation from unknown sources. And here's exactly how to check and correct this on Android specifically. Open your Settings app, navigate to Apps, then to Special App Access, and from there to install unknown apps. where you will see a complete list of every single app on your device currently granted permission to install additional software without going through the official Play Store, and it is genuinely worth carefully reviewing this entire list, since many users are genuinely surprised to discover that a file manager, a web browser, or some other completely unrelated app has been quietly granted this specific permission at some point in the past, often without the user ever consciously, deliberately approving it for that specific purpose. And revoking this permission from any app that does not genuinely currently need it represents one of the single highest value, lowest effort security improvements available to any Android user concerned about exactly the risk this FBI warning describes. And it is genuinely worth understanding that this connects directly to a considerably more comprehensive protection we covered in detail in a previous video on this channel, specifically Android's own advanced protection mode, which, when enabled, specifically restricts app installation to the official Play Store entirely, closing off this exact sideloading vulnerability comprehensively rather than requiring you to manually review and adjust individual app permissions one at a time. And now, let us walk through this second genuinely critical hidden setting this FBI warning points toward, involving data sharing permissions, specifically, since the FBI's own advisory language is remarkably direct on this exact point, specifically stating, disable unnecessary data sharing. And it is genuinely worth understanding exactly where this specific setting lives and how to actually configure it on both major mobile platforms, on Android specifically. Open settings, then navigate to security and privacy, or on some devices this may be labeled simply privacy. And from there you will find a dedicated permission manager section, allowing you to review, app by app, exactly which specific permissions each individual app on your device has been granted. Location access, contacts access, microphone access, camera access, and it is genuinely worth taking the time to work through this complete list carefully rather than simply skimming past it, specifically looking for any app that has been granted access to a category of information it genuinely has no legitimate functional reason to need, a simple flashlight app requesting access to your contacts list, or a photo editing app requesting access to your precise location. History represent exactly the kind of mismatched, unnecessary permission grants, worth immediately revoking, and Samsung specifically offers an additional, genuinely useful built-in tool worth knowing about, since Samsung devices allow you to navigate directly to Settings, then Security and Privacy, where your device will automatically scan itself for potential issues, and Samsung's own documentation specifically notes that you can scan your device for threats and resolve any issues directly from that same screen, representing a genuinely convenient, centralized way to identify and address exactly this category of concern without needing to manually review every single individual app permission entirely on your own. And it is genuinely worth walking through the equivalent process, specifically S or iPhone users as well, since this FBI warning genuinely applies to both major platforms rather than being an Android-specific concern exclusively. On iPhone, open Settings, then navigate to Privacy and Security, where you will find the exact same kind of category by category permission review, location services, contacts, microphone, camera, and specific menu allows you to see not simply whether an app has location access at all, but precisely how that access is configured. Options generally include never ask next time while using the app, and always and using encrypted messaging specifically for any genuinely sensitive communications. And it is genuinely worth understanding why that third specific recommendation, encrypted messaging, matters so directly in connection with this broader warning, since standard SMS text messages are not interception compared to communications sent through a properly encrypted messaging platform specifically. And it is genuinely worth being fair and balanced regarding a specific, important nuance worth understanding here, since not every foreign developed app genuinely represents an equivalent level of risk, and the FBI's own advisory specifically distinguishes based on the specific legal and regulatory environment governing where a given company is actually headquartered. The core underlying concern specifically involves companies legally subject to Chinese national security law specifically, which creates a distinct, well-documented legal requirement to share data with the Chinese government upon request, a genuinely different situation compared to apps developed by companies headquartered in countries without this exact same specific legal framework, meaning a blanket, indiscriminate suspicion of literal eye, every single app not developed by a domestic company genuinely overstates what this warning actually specifically claims. The FBI's concern is considerably more targeted and specific than that broader framing might initially suggest, and it is genuinely worth understanding a specific, sobering piece of context regarding exactly how effective this kind of official warning has actually proven to be in practice so far, since despite congressional hearings, near bans, lawsuits, and now this direct FBI warning specifically, many of the apps at the center of this exact concern remain more popular than ever, with reporting specifically noting that TikTok defied virtually every regulatory pressure applied throughout 2025 and still ranked as the second most downloaded app in the entire country, while other Chinese-developed shopping platforms specifically continued growing by double-digit percentages throughout that same period. And it is genuinely worth understanding why this specific gap between official warnings and actual measurable user behavior exists, since it honestly reflects a genuinely difficult, ongoing tension between convenience, genuinely compelling app functionality, and abstract, somewhat difficult to personally, viscerally feel privacy and security risk, meaning simply knowing about this warning intellectually does not automatically translate into the specific behavioral changes the FBI is actually recommending, which is precisely why this video has specifically focused on walking through the exact, concrete, practical settings worth adjusting right now, rather than simply repeating the warning itself in the abstract. And it is genuinely worth addressing directly one additional related regulatory development specifically worth understanding as part of this broader context, since the Federal Communications Commission separately announced a ban specifically on new consumer routers manufactured outside the United States, a genuine signal that government concern regarding foreign technology risk extends considerably beyond simply mobile apps specifically, encompassing the broader category of networking hardware and infrastructure as well, meaning this entire FBI warning genuinely represents one piece within a considerably larger, ongoing pattern of official concern regarding foreign technology supply chains more generally, rather than an isolated, standalone advisory focused purely on smartphone apps in complete isolation. And it is genuinely worth walking through, one final time, the complete, practical, step-by-step checklist worth actually working through on your own device right now, since this represents the single most valuable, actionable part of this entire video. First, on Android specifically, check your Install Unknown App settings and revoke that specific permission from any app that does not genuinely currently need it. Second, on both Android and iPhone specifically, work through your complete permission manager or privacy and security settings menu, app by app, revoking any permission grant that does not genuinely match that specific app's actual legitimate functional purpose. Third, specifically review which apps on your device EE were developed by companies headquartered in countries subject to data sharing legal requirements that concern you personally, and make your own genuinely informed decision regarding whether continuing to use each specific app is worth that particular trade-off for your own individual situation. Fourth, consider switching to properly encrypted messaging specifically for any genuinely sensitive personal or professional communications, rather than relying purely on standard unencrypted text messaging. And fifth, and genuinely worth understanding as connecting directly to a topic we covered in detail in a previous video on this channel, consider enabling Android's advanced protection mode, specifically if you want a single, comprehensive setting that closes off the side-loading vulnerability entirely, rather than needing to manually manage individual app installation permissions one at a time going forward. And it is genuinely worth closing with an honest, balanced, and complete summary of exactly what this FBI warning does and does not actually represent. This is a genuine, official, formally issued public service announcement from a credible federal law enforcement agency, specifically warning about real, well-documented data security risks tied to certain foreign-developed applications, and specifically recommending genuinely practical, actionable steps, including auditing app permissions and disabling unnecessary data sharing, precisely the specific hidden settings we have walked through in detail throughout this entire video. But it is honestly not a claim that every single app on your phone is secretly, actively spying on you, or that you must immediately delete every application not developed by a domestic company. It represents a genuinely reasonable evidence-based call for improved digital hygiene, understanding exactly what data your apps actually have access to, and making genuinely informed, deliberate choices about which specific trade-offs between convenience and privacy you're personally comfortable accepting, rather than simply leaving every single permission on your device sitting at whatever default configuration it happened to arrive with. If you found this breakdown of the FBI's actual 2026 smartphone warning genuinely helpful in understanding exactly what settings to check and why, please take a moment to like this video, share it with anyone in your life who could benefit from a more secure, more deliberately configured phone, and subscribe to this channel so you continue receiving accurate, carefully researched breakdowns of genuinely significant security warnings as they continue to emerge throughout the rest of the year. Let us know in the comments below which specific setting surprised you most once you actually went and checked it yourself, and we will see you in the next video. Until then, stay informed, stay in control of exactly what your own apps actually have access to, and stay appropriately proactive about your own digital security rather than waiting for the next headline to remind you. And it is genuinely worth expanding on a few additional angles of this story that deserve more careful, detailed treatment, starting with a closer look at exactly how a backdoor vulnerability like the one the FBI's advisory describes actually gets exploited in practice, since understanding the real mechanics genuinely helps you appreciate why the specific settings we walked through matter so much. When a malicious app is granted sideloading privileges or excessive permissions, it does not necessarily need to steal your data the moment you install it. Sophisticated malware specifically designed to exploit known operating system, vulnerabilities can sit quietly for extended periods, waiting for a specific trigger, a software update, a particular network connection, or simply a scheduled check-in with a remote server before actually activating its data collection or backdoor functionality. And this is precisely why the FBI's advisory specifically emphasizes that this kind of access can persist even when you believe an app's permissions have already been revoked, since a sufficiently privileged piece of malware may have already established alternative pathways to maintain that access, independent of the specific permission toggle you adjusted afterward, meaning genuinely removing a problematic app entirely, rather than simply adjusting its permissions after the fact, represents a meaningfully more thorough response once you have identified a genuine concern. And it is genuinely worth walking through a bit more detail regarding exactly how to identify which specific apps on your own device might actually warrant this kind of closer scrutiny. Since simply knowing that Chinese-developed apps represent a specific category of concern does not automatically tell you which apps on your own personal phone actually fall into that category, and a genuinely practical approach involves checking the developer information listed directly on each app's store listing. Both the Google Play Store and Apple's App Store specifically display the name of the publisher, developer or company directly on an app's information page, and taking a few minutes to actually look up unfamiliar developer names, checking where that company is actually headquartered and what its own stated data handling and privacy practices genuinely are, represents a considerably more informed approach than either ignoring this concern entirely or reflexively, deleting every app whose name does not sound familiar, and it is genuinely worth understanding. A related practical nuance specifically worth appreciating here, since app ownership and corporate structure can genuinely change over time, exactly as we saw with TikTok's own significant 2026 restructuring into a new majority United States-owned joint venture, meaning an app that may have previously fallen squarely within this specific category of concern could, following exactly this kind of corporate restructuring, present a meaningfully different risk profile going forward. And staying reasonably informed about this kind of ownership change, rather than relying purely on outdated assumptions about a specific app's ownership structure from several years earlier, genuinely represents part of maintaining an accurate, up-to-date understanding of your own personal risk exposure, and it is genuinely worth addressing a specific question that naturally arises once you start working through this entire checklist yourself. Whether deleting a specific app entirely versus simply adjusting its permissions represents a meaningfully different level of protection. And the honest answer is that these two approaches genuinely address somewhat different aspects of the underlying risk. Adjusting permissions specifically limits what new data a given app can access going forward, while deleting the app entirely also removes whatever code is actually running on your device, closing off the specific backdoor and persistent access. Concerns the FBI's advisory specifically highlighted, meaning for any app you have genuine, significant concern about Ixto, complete removal generally represents the more thorough, comprehensive response, while permission adjustment represents a genuinely useful, lower friction option for apps you want to continue using, but with meaningfully reduced data access going forward. And it is genuinely worth taking a moment to address directly why this entire topic deserves the level of careful, balanced treatment we have given it throughout this video, rather than either dismissing government warnings reflexively or treating every single such warning as an unquestionable, absolute directive requiring immediate, drastic action, since responsible digital security genuinely benefits from exactly this kind of measured, informed approach. Understanding the actual specific mechanism behind a given risk, checking your own personal exposure to that specific risk directly, and making deliberate, genuinely informed choices based on your own individual circumstances and risk tolerance represents a considerably more sustainable, genuinely effective long-term security practice than either panicked, reactive behavior triggered by a single dramatic headline, or complete indifference toward warnings issued by credible established institutions, specifically because the underlying concern feels somewhat abstract or difficult to personally, viscerally connect with your own everyday experience using your phone. And it is genuinely worth a Expanding on one further, important dimension of this entire story specifically worth understanding: the broader question of what happens to your data even after you decide to delete a concerning app from your own device, since this represents a genuinely important nuance that a simple checklist alone does not fully address. Deleting an app from your phone removes that specific software from your own device, but it does not automatically delete whatever data that app may have already collected and transmitted to its own servers during the period you had it installed, meaning if you have genuine concern about a specific app you have used extensively in the past, it is genuinely worth checking whether that company offers a formal data deletion request process. Many app privacy policies specifically describe how to submit exactly this kind of request, though it is honestly worth understanding that for companies operating under legal frameworks like the ones the FBI's advisory specifically describes, your ability to genuinely verify that such a deletion request has actually been honored remains considerably more limited compared to companies operating under more stringent, independently auditable data protection regulations, and it is genuinely worth understanding this specific limitation as part of a complete, honest picture of this entire situation, since it reinforces why the FBI's own recommended approach emphasizes proactive prevention, auditing permissions, and disabling unnecessary data sharing before problems occur, rather than relying primarily on after-the-fact remediation once data has already potentially been collected and transmitted elsewhere. And it is genuinely worth closing this expanded discussion with one final practical point specifically worth remembering. Since digital security guidance of exactly this kind tends to evolve fairly continuously as new apps, new